Grief is not the end of your story, it's the beginning of a new chapter. Welcome to the Empower Grief Journey podcast. I'm your host, Chris Mamone, and I'm the founder of the Empower Grief Journey coaching and podcast platform. Each episode brings real conversations with people from around the world who have navigated grief and discovered the strength to create new and inspired beginnings. You'll discover how to walk from loss to empowerment through powerful storytelling that will guide you towards a future filled with courage and hope. Today, I have an awesome guest with us. He's also from the East Coast, and I'm excited to speak with him on this unique aspect of grief and loss. His name is Rob Gutro. He's a best-selling author, an award-winning author, a paranormal investigator, and a pet medium. Since he was a teen, he could receive messages from ghosts or spirits who have crossed over. And as a meteorologist in his career job, he also provides scientific explanations about how energy is the baseline for the afterlife and the medium that entities use to communicate with us. I'm very much, as you guys know, a very open spiritual person, as you guys have heard on my podcast, and I do like to open our conversations up to what possibly could be after life and death for us. And I'm really excited to speak to people who have that ability to connect in mediumship, because there is a way for us to connect with our loved ones. Just because I say they're not here physically doesn't mean they're not with us in a different form. And so, without further ado, Rob, I want to welcome you on to the podcast.
Thank you, Chris. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, and I'm really excited to talk to you because pet loss is something that is not very well spoken about, but it is something that many people experience. And you certainly have a unique perspective about it with your capabilities. And so I'm excited for you to share how you found out about your capabilities that you have, and also the story you shared about losing your own pet and how that process worked for you through grief and healing.
Sure. So it all goes back to when I was a teenager. And but when I was a teenager, I went to my first wake, and that was my grandfather. And so it was kind of startling to me, but it was important for me to be. Um, 7 months later, that's when it all blew up because that's when he appeared to me in full color. And I knew something weird was going on. I confirmed it with my mother and father, and my mother had this gift, if you will. So I have it, and then her father, the one that appeared, had this gift. Um, I have two brothers. Neither one of them have it, but they do. They do understand, and they believe everything. Yeah. Um, that said, it wasn't until 2005 when I was on my own as an adult. I had a puppy, Buzz. Buzz is he was a Weimaraner. Was 7 months old. This is Buzz. I'm gonna cover my first pets in the Afterlife book. Um, I was walking Buzz, and his leash opened, and there was a dog across the street. He was killed by a car right in front of me. There's nothing more devastating than that. It's a sudden accident, unexpected. Um, so um, Buzz reawakened my abilities, if you will, and he taught me how pets communicate. And as someone who likes to journal, I kept notes of everything in a diary. That became the impetus of my first book. Um, while I decided to write this book after like 3 years or 2.5 years, I started to write the book because I realized that so many pets are going through this grief. Uh, they need some assurance that our pets, like are still around them, spirit, and reaching out to them and giving them signs. So I thought, okay, I'm going to write a book. My dad passed during that time, and my dad helped me prove to my mother and brothers that he would wait using a handkerchief. Um, so that all became the first book that I had read, Ghosts and Spirits Explained. And Buzz has a chapter. As time went on, I started doing readings, if you will, for other people who lost pets. And it brought a lot of healing to them. And it brought a lot of comfort to me, too, because if I can do that, if I can use this gift to bring healing, then that is my purpose.
I think that's a really beautiful purpose that you found through your journeys. And I just want to first off say I'm very sorry Buzz got killed by a car accident. That's a something my uncle's experienced multiple times with his dogs, and it's a very tragic way for them to pass. So I just want to say my condolences on that. I also wanted to share something about pets that not a lot of people think about, and that you can resonate to this really well, that our pets are very much an unconditional love in our life because we are everything to them from the minute we get them to the minute they leave. And they're in our life, by the way, for just a short period of time. And so, pets oftentimes don't talk back to us. They don't really communicate in the ways that humans communicate in. And they're oftentimes very much there to comfort us in many ways that sometimes people in our life are not able to show up for us. And so I think that's what makes losing a pet very, very hard.
Yeah, I totally agree. So in my in my daytime career, I was a meteorologist. I was a scientist. I just retired, so happy to say. And as a meteorologist, it was important for me to understand some of the science behind how this all happens. So there are two aspects that I look at. One is behavioral science, which is how pets behave in their lifetime. And they use those same behaviors to give signs from the other side. I can get into that a little more. The other aspect of it, from the scientific side, is the science of energy. Now, energy cannot be destroyed. There's a thermodynamics law that says of conservation of energy. It says energy can't be destroyed; it can only be transformed. And as a scientist, I know that there are energies within our bodies. If you think of cell splitting, if you think of how thoughts are measured as little electrical impulses, so what that law does when it applies to the afterlife is that our memories and our personality and the knowledge of our life couple with that energy, and we make a choice. Make a choice when we die to either cross over into spirit, the other side, heaven, Valhalla, whatever you want to call the other side. Or we can stay earthbound, which is not a good choice, and that's what I call a ghost. So spirits have crossed over, ghosts are earthbound at a fixed location of their choosing. Um, Ghosts and spirits cannot communicate with each other. The earthbound ones can't communicate with their loved ones who have crossed over. So I highly recommend crossing over. Um, but back to the behavioral aspect for a moment. I have learned that dogs, for instance, I'll use dogs as a baseline because I'm a dog dad. Dr. Stanley Coren is somebody that I have read a lot of books by. He wrote The Intelligence of Dogs and How Dogs Think. And what he explains is that dogs learn on multiple levels. So there's instinctual learning, there's habit and routine, there is verbal learning, there is emotional response learning, and there's socialization, all kinds of things. So because dogs learn on all those levels, they're really quite intelligent. And because they learn those ways, they can actually replicate them from spirit. So you may hear around dinner time when your dog used to be fed, you may hear their nails on the floor in the kitchen. You may see them or a shadow of them near the kitchen table. Um, so whatever your dog or cat or bird or rabbit used to do in life, they will do the same from the afterlife.
That is really fascinating that you say that because I lost my first pet last year to cancer, and I could not really explain why, but in that first 3 to 5 days after he passed, what you just said is what I experienced. I heard like him chewing on food. I heard his rustling on his blankets. I kept hearing that, and I would wake up in the middle of the night, and I'd look at his empty cage that I had, and I kept thinking he was there, and I really felt like he was in many ways.
Yeah, and that's a good way for them to let you know that they actually are still around you. Um, I'm sorry about the passing of your pet. Is that a rabbit?
It
Or
was 12-year-old. Yeah.
I'm
What I wanted to ask you, what kind of signs did Buzz leave you after he had passed? Did you hear claw marks on the floor? Are there some familiar noises that he made signs of?
He made a lot of things. So one of the first signs that he gave me and was a musical sign. Now, pets can help give you musical signs with the assistance from a human in spirit who understands what the music means. So when after Buzz was struck by a car, it took me 2 hours to get home, and the neighbors helped transport his body to my driveway and back of my truck to get him cremated. But I walked into the house, and I was the only one there. I had a roommate at the time who was walked into the house, and the radio was playing, and I will never forget it. I did not leave the radio on, and the song that was playing was "The Dance" by Garth Brooks, about a man who loved very deeply and lost the love of it. Couldn't be any more appropriate.
Wow.
While I was looking for my keys and my wallet and the radio, because I didn't know where the radio, the second song came on that was also a direct message. It was a song called Monday Morning Church by Alan Jackson. It's an obscure song now, but but it was about a man who lost the love of his life and his heart was as empty as a Monday morning church. Um, and I was astounded by those things. I finally found a radio and I turned it on. And on my way to the vet, I called a couple of friends and I said, please meet me there. They did. And we met out. I first went into the veterinary office and they said they'd come and get Buzz. And they took him in and they said, wait out here and we'll take you in so you can say goodbye. We were all standing there and there were two trash cans and both had lids on them. There was nothing else near them. And I heard Buzz say, Dad, I'm okay. At, at that moment, one of the lids on the trash can shot up in the air, probably about 3 or 4 feet high. Nothing behind it. So I knew it was him. Um, those are the first two signs. But Buzz continued to give me signs in many ways. I would hear his footsteps on the floor, on the stairs. Um, I would hear rustling in the house. Um, one night when I was making lunch for the next day, I was in the kitchen. It was right after I had adopted another Weimaraner. My dog Dolly, who was on the cover of Pets in the Afterlife 3. Um, so I was making lunch, and suddenly I saw what I thought was Dolly, the rear end of a Weimaraner, walking away from me. And I called to Dolly, and there was nothing. The dog kept going. So I stopped what I was doing, and I went and I followed into my living room. I lived in a little town house, and there was no way out of the living room. And I turned on the living room light, and there was no dog there. And I thought, what in the world? So I said, where's Dolly? I thought that was Dolly. So again, I was by myself. um, I ran upstairs, and there was Dolly curled up, sound asleep on my bed. So I knew that I was following Buzz into that living room.
So I have to ask you a question because some people may not be, believers in this area of life, but
Sure.
what was that like for you to experience that? Because if I can tell you right now, if I saw a shadow of my rabbit I'd freak out. I'd be in this very just disbelief state of things. Like, did I really just see that? Did that really just happen?
Well, that's generally the first initial reaction is we doubt ourselves. But what I've come to learn after connecting with people and pets and spirit for so long is that we really have to trust our feelings. I will tell you that when my grandfather materialized in front of me when I was 13 years old, he scared the daylights out of me. And I grabbed our family dog. I was the only one home, and I ran out the door. And I sat outside for like 2 hours until someone came home, and it was my parents first. And they looked at me and they said, "What are you doing?" And I told them. And I said, "He scared the daylights out." I said, why would he even appear like that? Someone said, "We have to talk." So so yes, it's perfectly acceptable to it's normal. Who wouldn't be afraid someone passed away showing up in front of you? Um, but they would do that, whether it's a shadow or in full color, which is very rare because it takes too much energy to burn. They do that to give us an assurance that they're okay, spirit.
So, one of the questions I have for you too is you brought up this idea about energy, and I was very addicted to watching Ghost Adventures for many, many years, and my brain always went to this place of like, how do we prove this? How do we validate it? Because there are people out there that set up things on TV to make stuff look a certain way, and but you made up a very valid point when you brought up behavioral science, is that energy cannot be destroyed. It can only be manipulated and changed, and I do find it very interesting that our souls are in these body vessels of ours, even pets for that matter. And in that energy transfer of things, do our souls and do our pets still maintain, pretty much fully who they were in the earthbound form as they do in spirit?
So when we transition, that's a great question. When we transition, what I've learned is really we are just energy, and and it's with our soul, and the soul is memories, personality, and every living is a soul. But it's really just energy, and we can't really conceive what energy looks like. I mean, you can look at lightning, for instance, and that's energy. You can get light coming, oh, that's energy. Um, but it's hard to imagine that with a consciousness. But in essence, that's what we are. And when when we cross over, we join that greater energy. Some people call it God or Allah or whatever. Um, but that's what I found out what happened. Um, Interesting thing about energy too is that I've learned that because spirits of our loved ones and earthbounders are energy, they use energy strong enough to give us signs. They use two different kinds of energy. One is physical energy. So heat, light, water, and electricity are ways that they get strong enough to convey presence. Often, when somebody passes, they may manipulate or your electricity. Um, I went to one grief workshop where people had lost human children, and many of them, when I asked them about whether or not their cell phone has ever gone, and their number of their child past appears, I think there were like 6 or 7 people that told me that that exactly happened to them. So they can manipulate electric things as well. Um, so heat, light, water, electricity, but there's also another side of energy, and that's emotional. Energy is emotions. So love, faith, and hope. The love, faith, and hope we share loved ones empowers them to and give us signs. Right. Earthbound ghosts are different. They use negative emotional energy because they're grounded to earth, fear, anxiety, depression, and that. So, but that's a whole other story. But we're talking about spirits, and any of those physical energies, and the love, faith, and hope that we have for them, those are the things that make them strong enough.
So I want to ask you a really important question because we are talking about grief and loss in that realm. And I've always heard that grief is a negative energy or a low vibration energy. I want to get your opinion on this. Does grief prevent us in many ways from being able to connect with our loved ones when they cross through to the spirit realm? Does it create a barrier of some kind? And are there some ways that maybe we can navigate that to be more open and receptive to those spiritual messages that we could be receiving?
Yeah, great question. Grief is indeed a negative emotional, And because spirits are positive emotional energy, they have to have enough energy from different sources in order to break through that wall of emotional energy. Typically, what happens is the grief is much more intense first 2 to 4 weeks, and that varies from person. So usually I tell people that the easiest way for um, pets or people to come through is to ask them, because dreams are the easiest way for spirit to communicate, because our logical mind, part of the brain that says, oh, that's not possible, that's not a sign, that's asleep. And that way they're able to come in. Earthbound ghosts, by the way, cannot come, only spirits do. So I recommend to people sleep, look at a picture of your loved one. Look at them, focus on their eyes, talk to them, ask them if they will come visit in your dream. Usually over 2 days, because you're inviting, and it's like opening your door and welcoming somebody into your house.
Uh, I never would have thought to do that, and that sounds very inviting. I'll share since you brought that up. I had this happen when my son passed and when my grandfather passed. It all was in about 30 days or so after they passed. I did have those dreams that you're talking about, and they were so vivid and so clear, like you and I talking on the podcast today, clear. And I could not make sense of it, and especially with my grandfather, I couldn't figure it out because if I felt like I was talking to him for hours, and he showed up out of nowhere. But he also at the same time left me very quickly. And I kept asking, where are you going? Like, where are you disappearing? And he wouldn't answer it. All he would say is, I love you and I have to go. And I never understood, like, what that was. And I still to this day don't know what he meant by that. Um, but yeah, I think it's interesting that you validate that in many ways, that when we open ourselves up to allowing ourselves that energy to come through in a dream state, it is in a many ways allowing us to have that connection with them to get a final message.
Yes, and your grandfather probably um, wanted to just come in long enough to let you know that he's okay, and that and that he's around you, actually helping you, guiding you from the other side.
I think that's what's so powerful about, because I've talked to mediums a lot of my podcast. I've only talked to two people that specialize in pet loss like you have, and I'm very, very open and very, very receptive to it because I've heard so many stories of people that have those experiences that are unexplained in many ways, and that's where I see people that don't believe a lot have those experiences, and they'll say it's unexplained or it's just random or it was just my brain thinking something, but I feel like it's so much more than that. And if we allow ourselves to be open enough to say, what is this experience? And, what is this trying to tell me, as I like to say, I think we will find out that there is more beyond this physical realm of life than we actually know about right now.
Absolutely, and our pets, like people, will continue to use things around us too to give us signs. Um, Sometimes they will influence others to like come near us. May hear someone's name mentioned that is the same name as your loved one. It's not your loved one. Made sure that we at that time hear it. Um, my mother is famous for doing that. I felt like she was on vacation um, with me and my partner, and when we were in Germany, and I kept saying to him, I know she's here. I feel her all the time." And he said, "Well, where's your sign?" And we were in Germany, and we were on a bus, and we were driving by um, a store, supermarket. The name of the supermarket was Norma. That's my mother's name. So what's an Italian name doing on a big storefront in Germany? There's no such thing as a coincidence. Um, and other things too is that they can influence things like birds and butterflies and dragonflies and so forth. Um, my dog Sprite, when he passed, right after he passed, a couple of days after he passed, it was past July 8th, 2013. A yellow and black butterfly came into the backyard with the other dogs. And normally we have have dachshunds and Weimaraner, and they would always chase birds, butterflies, anything. They didn't do anything. That butterfly on the ground, same way that Sprite used to kind of amble around because probably with boxing, and they didn't touch it. I get down on my knee and with my camera, my cell phone camera, I took a picture of the bird that was this big, and it's in one of my books. And on July 8th, several times after that, yellow and black butterfly. So, and I could hear Sprite say, "Dad, it's today," and it was the anniversary of his passing.
That is so fascinating to me that they can influence other energy and other forms of being in our physical plane. And I wanted to ask you about that too because I've been curious. I've gotten two rabbits since I lost my first one, and I for some reason feel like the one who's a boy, he's got this boisterous, crazy energy, and I wanted to ask you, if we say we have one dog like Buzz or Sprite, and then we get another pet after they pass, are they influencing them with the behavior in a certain way to remind us of them?
Yes, they absolutely do that. That was one of the things that I learned very early on, that whenever we have spirit, they will influence the new pet, something they used to do, so that we know that they are around the spirit. So maybe a habit, maybe a good habit, maybe a bad habit. When our dachshund Franklin passed, Franklin was he was the most stubborn, bullheaded little dachshund you ever have met. When he passed, 2 years later, we adopted another dog, 10-year-old dachshund terrier mix named Cody. We didn't get to meet him because he was states away, but talked to the foster parent and so forth. We adopted him. Chris, he is the most stubborn, bullheaded little dog, just like Franklin. And he
I
does the
love that.
same thing Franklin used to do, same things. So we know Frank. I kept seeing. I keep thinking to my partner, I'm like, yeah, Franklin is teaching him all the bad habits.
So, Rob, I love that you have all this experience because I can't help but resonate with you on that same level that I really do feel like in many ways our pests of the past influence the new ones around us. And I share that because my rabbit Finn is just as crazy as Finley was and when he was a baby for whatever reason. And he's a little terrorist, like you said about your dachshund being stubborn. My guy Finn is just a terrorist. He's a little wild man. Can't control the guy. I wanted to ask you when you work with people that have gone through pet loss, I'm really curious, do you run into people who are very open to this? Do you run into people who are very skeptical about it? And, do you in many ways find people like me that have had those experiences, but we've never really been able to define it?
Yeah, I find all of them actually. I love the ones that have had experiences but can't define it because I'm explained. Um, Often I tell people who are skeptical, if they come to me and they say, "I'm a skeptic. I don't believe anything that say," I'm like, "Well, then don't come to me," because I've already decided that whatever I tell you is not good. Um, and then there are others that are totally open-minded, and then over time, they will understand things. So whenever people go to some of the things you may not understand right off. Some things may take a while. And in the case of one pet reading I did for a guy with a black lab, this gentleman had a black lab that passed, and he just asked a couple of questions. But the dog came through to me telling me that 512. And I wrote him and I said, maybe it's a date, time, I don't know what it is, but he's adamant about 512. And the gentleman was very nice. He wrote me back and he said, "Thank you. I don't know what that means. And I'll see if I can figure it out." 8 months later, Chris, he wrote me back and he said, "I'm the guy that whose lab gave you Parkville." And he said, "I'm a doctor and I was in my office this week and I was meeting with a patient who had a collapsed lung. I went and I wrote down the medical code 512. my dog passed from collapsed lung.
Whoa. Okay. That's very on point. That's
Yeah. Um, so um, one thing that I want to talk about, though, in terms of grief, um, it's natural to feel uh, extremely grief-stricken after the loss of a pet. And the reason for that I have found, and I've read psychological studies, is that we raise them the same way as children. We take them to school, take them to the doctor. We teach them to play well with others. We teach them routine. They know when dinner time is. Out this. When they're sick, we help heal them. Um, they learn words. They learn all kinds of things from us. They read our emotions. And I always tell people that the only difference between a pet and a human child is that a pet will never grow up and marry someone you don't like, and right? And pets don't often talk back. So, but because we raise them like, the grief is extremely deep. Um, and I have, honestly, I have received emails from people who told me that um, they were at the end of the rope, just in grief. And I have them call 988, and I try to do immediate connections with them. And but that's something that is really important. Mediums are not therapists. Um, People have to seek out resources to work through their grief, and no pet wants you to go that far in grief. What they want you to do is honor their memory, share their happy memory, talk about it, adopt another pet in honor of them, make a memorial garden or something. Even if you keep a gallery on your phone and you look at them every now and then. I have done a couple of things to help in my own group because in July this year, my dog Tyler passed, and it was 4 days after a diagnosis of cancer. It was fast acting. It was stage 4 cancer. We took him in for a ultrasound on the 25th of July by the 29th. Totally unexpected. I was gutted, hollow. I was empty. Um, and yes, it affects pet mediums the same. It doesn't matter that I have an ability to. My grief blocked those messages. So what I did was I kept his blanket on one side of my bed. I kept 4 or 5 of his toys on my bed. And whenever I miss him, I would toy. I would even fall asleep holding. Um, it was very therapeutic, and it's something I always recommend. Um, but talk to somebody about it. In a couple of my books, I do have licensed therapists have a chapter in there on how to cope with it, because that's such an important part.
I think that, when we lose a pet, it's a very hard loss, like you said. Like it's almost like losing a child or losing a family member we're very, very close to. And the thing too that I learned about losing a pet, because that's the first time I've gone through that, I didn't realize how much of a routine they are in our life. I mean, we have, I don't know what it's like having a dog, but with rabbits, you got to get up every morning and clean the cage. You got to feed hay, do food, do water, do the same thing at night. And when they're gone, that routine in your brain is still there, kick firing, automatic. You're not thinking about it consciously. It's very subconscious process. And when they pass away and leave, our body's still in that mode of, well, I got to do this for them. I got to do that for them. And I really appreciate and love that you said that you hung on to his blanket and his toys and held on to those in those moments. I think that is something very, very normal, and I wish more people would accept and adopt in their healing process because I think when we try to, clean things up and put things away or get rid of things, it's almost like pushing us in the grief process to get over it very quickly. And unfortunately, our bodies and our minds are not going to do that. I've always told people it's not going to happen that way. But giving ourselves that opportunity to sit with those things and process those memories and relive those good experiences we had with them. And if that means holding on to a blanket or a toy, that's completely normal. And I think that's something that should be honored in that grief journey.
Yeah, it really has helped a lot. I know that when my dad passed, my mom wanted to get rid of his clothes immediately. She said it was too painful. So we honored her request, and then what she did keep was she kept looking at pictures from their wedding from 53, so forth. So she held on to other things. But with a pet, it's, they don't have that many things. So it is, to me, it's very important to some of the things that, and it does bring.
Yeah, I think it really gives us a good sense of closure in many ways to hold on to certain things. I did that with my pet rabbit. I still have blankets of his. I still have certain toys. I have a small amount of his fur from when he would shed. I know my wife thought that was crazy at a certain time, and I said, I don't know why, but I can't get rid of it. I know it sounds crazy to me, but when you have a pet in your life for 12 years, or if you even have a dog for, some people I've known have had dogs for 15 years or cats for 20 years. We don't really think about it consciously, but that in many ways, that's a big, big chunk of your life. That wasn't just a one-off circumstance with someone you had in your life. And so, I think too, when we go through our phones, by the way, and I'll shamefully admit right now, I have thousands of rabbit pictures on my phone. I don't know why, but those are my pet photos, and I'm glad that I kept my pet photos, by the way, because they pop up on my auto feed all the time, or I look back and say, oh, that was that one crazy time somebody chewed the baseboard up, or somebody clawed my clothes to death, or whatever it was, and it makes you in that moment of grief have that little spark of, hey, you know what? I remember how annoying that was in that moment, and I missed that, and I wish that happened again.
Yeah, and really the gift of love that they gave us, the gift of unconditional love, is the greatest gift. And it's not something that we learn. I think a lot of people, pets, learn it much faster than those without. Um, but that's what keeps me going. I have 5 dogs in spirit right now, and we currently have 2. One thing I will say though is that living pets that are left behind still with you grieve equally as deep as we do. Um, Tyler left behind his brother Dash, who's a Dachshund Chihuahua mix. He's now 17 and a half years old. We adopted him at 10. He's blind. Since Tyler passed, he's gone blind. He's incontinent. When Tyler passed, he stopped eating, had no interest in treats. He stopped playing games. He wouldn't do agility anymore because Tyler followed Tyler. Everything Tyler did, and when Tyler passed, everything they did together ended. And over the first 2 or 3 months, it took a lot of tension and trying to get him at a normal schedule and trying to get him interested in eating again. Um, and our pets grieve just as deeply, if not more. Also,
I'm really glad you brought that up because that's a question I wanted to ask you about. Because we have a thing in the rabbit community that when you have a bonded rabbit, just like I have now, I've got a male and a female. Um, in the rabbit community, it's very known that if a rabbit does pass and they're bonded, not to take the body away right away. That's a bad idea. Because your other rabbit, by the way, will go very quickly if you do that. And so. It's been recommended that if you have that situation happen, to leave the body there for 2 or 3 hours at least at a minimum, to allow that rabbit to say its goodbyes. And I love that you brought up that pets grieve, just as much as we do, if not more, because I've seen that look in dogs before. I've seen it in rabbits. I've seen that look in the eyes that there is grief there. They're not just I don't think they move on from that at all. I think they're very much like us. They grieve, like you said. Yeah.
yeah, they really do hold it a lot longer, and it affected it affected our dog Dash physically as well as mentally. Um, he lost 3 pounds. He was only 10 pounds when Tyler died. Now he's only 7 pounds. He grief will do that. And it does the same thing. But just give your current pets more attention. Um, and the other thing too is that if you have a toy from your pet that passed, put it next to them. I have a bunch of Tyler's toys, and they're on the bed with Dash right now. Actually, Dash is sleeping, and I have several of Tyler's toys, and Dash always curls up next to them. Sleep.
That's really beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that. And are there some ways that we can help our pets, along with ourselves, cope in that situation? Are there some things we can do to just help them comfort in that initial stage of grief?
In terms of pets, just show them more attention. If you do have a toy or a blanket that the pet who passed had, put that next to them because scent is everything. They can even if you wash it over and over again, they can still smell the scent of the other pet. Um, so scent is probably the most comforting. Same thing for living pets, like when you go away and you leave a pet with someone to watch. Leave a t-shirt that you or a pair of socks that you wore and you didn't launder. Leave it in their bed and that comforts them. It's the same kind of.
I think that's really great advice. I appreciate you sharing that. And Rob, I wanted to, since we're getting close to wrapping up the podcast, I wanted to leave some space to talk about your books that you wrote because I can tell you've written many, many books, and I wanted you to share a little bit about them with our audience because I'm trying to raise more awareness on my podcast to hold space for people who go through pet loss and not. I've gone through that place of people saying things like, "Oh, it's hard to put them down, isn't it?" Or, "Oh, you can get another one." And I just don't. I feel like those are inappropriate to say to people who lose pets. And I also feel like there's a lot of help your books can provide comfort-wise for people who are going through pet loss. So I'd love to open it up for you to tell us a little bit about your books and how they can help people going through that side of grief.
Sure. So a couple of things that I want to mention is number one, when you have to make that decision to help your pet cross over, they understand what's happening. They can read your emotions and they know that you're panicked or sad or totally upset because they can also feel what's happening. I know that my Tyler understood when I had to make that decision July 29th. And usually when they come to me, they always have thank you. So, so that's really important. They don't want us to feel guilty about having. Um, so my Pets in the Afterlife series, it has 4 books in it. There are 2 more in the works. One is Tyler's story, um, because it crushed me. But I've healed from it, healing from it now. And they will teach you how your pets communicate. There are stories of other pets with every chapter has a picture. So that's one series of my books. I have 3 other series actually that don't involve pets. One is called Ghosts on a Medium's Vacation, where I go on vacation. I encounter ghosts in different places like Ireland and Arizona, and then I prove who they are. Another series is called The Haunting of, and that's when I team up with my colleague Too Soon, and we go to paranormal places in New England, and we explore them, and then help those that are there. There are a couple of books in that series. One's coming out actually first of the year called The Hunt Memorial Library, Haunting. And there's another series called Ghosts and Spirits, and that talks about the earthbound ones on paranormal investigations, plus the spirits who have crossed over. Lots of stuff. I have 14 books and many more, and they're all based on my experiences, so you won't read the stories anywhere else.
That's absolutely incredible. Rob, I just want to say it's been an incredible pleasure to speak with you today about pet loss and give us some background into our pets because like I said, pets are very unconditional loving and they're a little more unconditional than a lot of humans we meet along our journey, and they have so much to give us, so much to teach us. And it's been a real pleasure for you to share your story today of going through the pet losses you've gone through and sharing your gift of being able to communicate with them. I can just tell that you are able to help these people through these situations that a lot of society tells us to move on with, but really helping us keep that connection going, even if we decide to adopt another pet, or even if we don't, letting us still maintain that connection. Do you also, by the way, provide mediumship to people who go through pet loss?
Um, I did. I actually just stopped doing it because I've been doing it for 20 and I'm
Oh,
kind of
wow.
burned out. um, so instead I urge people to look. They'll be able to. They don't need. All they need to do is understand the ways in which um, from the afterlife, and then they'll be able to recognize things.
Well, that's if that's one thing I can encourage listeners today that I think we all took away from Rob, this is a very powerful one, is be very open. Allow your intuition to guide you. Allow yourselves to, if you hear those clickety clacks of nails on the floor, know that that's your pet nearby. That's completely okay. Just acknowledge that and allow that feeling to come through because as we've come to find today, our pets not, they left here in physical form, they're still here in a different form for us. And more often than not, they never leave our side. And so I just want to make sure you guys take that opportunity in one of these moments to allow yourself to feel the feels, as I like to say, because you've got to feel to heal. But I also do believe that our pets guide us forward in many ways into different aspects of our life. So, Rob, what I want to leave us with is, if anybody's listening to this episode and they want to connect with you, where can they find you?
They can go to my website, robgutro.com or petspirits.com. Those are the same place. And I'm also on social media, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, all those places.
I love that. Well, for listeners, I just want to let you guys know when you get done listening to this podcast, go ahead and look in the show notes. I'll have Rob's contact information there as well as his social media. I definitely recommend reaching out to him. Go look up his books. I'm sure they're available on Amazon. I'll have the links for that too. But as you can see, he's just a great guy with a very experienced knowledge with pets. And I do know that if you guys are going through a hard situation or at the end of life with your pet, or even you've lost a pet and are looking for that closure, I'm very confident his content and his books will be a solace for you as you navigate through that grief journey. Rob, thank you so much for being a guest on today's show.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure to talk to you.
And I want to thank all of our listeners today for joining Rob and I on today's episode of the Empower Grief Journey podcast. If this episode resonates with you, please share it with somebody you know who could benefit from Rob's story. For more episodes that are designed to empower you and support you during your grief journey, visit empowergriefjourney.com and subscribe to this podcast. You can find us on Apple and Podbean. The Empower Grief Journey is all about honoring your journey, embracing your emotions, and finding strength in your own time. I want you to know that you're never alone on this journey, and together we can navigate grief with courage and compassion. Until next time, be kind to yourself and take your grief journey one step at a time.